Yes, well, I'm pleased that you are all here. All right. All right, let us get started. Chevre, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Nice to see you all. Let us bless Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Kidshanu B'mitzvotav V'tzivanu La'asok B'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai, sovereign over time and space, who makes us holy with commandments, commands us to engage in the study of Torah. Today, we dive into Jewish mysticism. As you can see from the title, this is an easy introduction to Jewish mysticism, which is ordinarily a very hard subject. So, as we will encounter, and this is a bit of new learning for me, I always felt that Honey from the Rock was a nice primer for Jewish mysticism. A primer is something you do when you know nothing and you want to get basic information. And I think to some extent that's true, although this book is not necessarily written to be a primer. We may perceive it as such, but it's not necessarily meant to be a primer. But it does introduce mystical ideas, Kabbalistic ideas that I think will find inspiring. And if you knew nothing about Jewish mysticism or Kabbalah before, you will walk away from this experience knowing more. And I believe, having appreciated Honey from the Rock and the work of Rabbi Lawrence Kushner, who is truly an amazing teacher and an amazing mind. Reformed rabbi, by the way, who worked for a long time in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and then he retired, and I believe currently he lives in San Francisco near family. His daughter is a classmate of mine, Noah Kushner, also a rabbi, and his son-in-law, Mike Lezak, Rabbi Lezak, an old friend from camp. So I feel very connected. Of course, you may not know this, but I was very, very honored to study with Rabbi Kushner at Hebrew Union College. We studied a different set of texts, Torah gems, Itorei Torah, and he's definitely influenced by Itorei Torah. And we studied Parshat HaShavua according to Hasidic masters. So with that as an introduction, I would like to take a moment here to reflect on what we might call a more traditional view of Jewish mysticism, which we call in Hebrew Kabbalah. Kabbalah specifically means tradition. So while we as Reformed Jews understand tradition differently than, say, the Lubavitcher, who I studied to get an Orthodox perspective on Kabbalah here, or Kabbalah. The truth is that it's important for us to understand the origins of Kabbalah, whether from a traditional Orthodox perspective or traditional Reform perspective, matters not. I think it's important to study it all to give us a sense of what we are learning and how we can go about understanding Honey from the Rock and what it has to teach us about basic mystical perspectives. So let's take a quick look at what Jewish mysticism is and what it is not, and then we'll take questions. All right, so we know, right now we probably should mute everybody. So go ahead and mute yourselves if you can. Anytime we want to legitimize anything Jewish, we want to anchor it in historic moments and in Jewish text. So Kabbalah only has value to us from a Jewish perspective if it is based in a historic moment, specifically the moment at Mount Sinai in which Torah was revealed. And that, of course, was a public experience. So as much as spirituality may be a very personal, individualized pursuit, when we are pursuing Kabbalah, we draw back all the way to Sinai and the revelation and the notion that the Torah, which is the embodiment, the receptacle, the vessel for all this wisdom at Sinai, we honor this moment of Matan Torah as an historical and as a public event. And so our study finds its legitimacy ultimately the more it's anchored in that moment of Sinai and in the sacred text of Torah. Comprehend?
Yes.
Okay.
Gotcha.
All right. So another part here that I want to clarify or hone in on is that this moment at Sinai, this moment of revelation at Sinai, Matan Torah, very much has God in the center of it, either as the divine source or as the essential inspiration of Torah and its wisdom and its nature. So wherever you find yourself on the spectrum of theology, particularly as it relates to the revelation of Torah, if you believe that God gave Moses the commandments at Sinai, fine. So the source of the Torah, the source of Kabbalah is God. And if you believe, or if you believe that maybe not, God literally gave the tablets, the luchot, to Moses at Sinai, but regardless of whether that's true or not, Moses drew inspiration via his relationship with God, and it helped him create the Torah, or helped him and others create the Torah. Still, the origins of Torah are anchored in that divine inspiration. So, what that means, regardless of the spectrum of theology, wherever you find yourself is okay. But the bottom line here is that Torah is seen as the exclusive basis for any Kabbalistic claim. Now, I might debate that as a Reformed rabbi, because I don't believe that revelation stopped at Sinai. I feel like it's unfolding. And so there are numerous ways while the revelation continues to unfold that we can figure out, well, maybe there are claims. We're going to read anecdotes and reflections and kavanot, intentional statements by Rabbi Kushner that seem to reflect a very unique and personal experience that I think is legitimate if you understand the revelation of Torah to be ongoing. Now, if you think that the revelation stopped at Sinai, which many Jews do, then you might not find authentic Jewish mysticism to be a function of what this particular rabbi has to say or that particular rabbi has to say. You may be only concerned that that authenticity is from Torah, that it is an integral part of Torah. As I said before, just by definition or translation, Kabbalah means tradition. And just to reiterate that Kabbalah, by definition, is not essentially a collection of personal insights or what this rabbi has to say about life or what that rabbi has to say about meaning and purpose or what that other rabbi has to say about values. While we can lay claim to the importance of those teachings, they are not necessarily the function, the outcome really, of Kabbalah. Kabbalah has its roots at Sinai and Matan Torah. All right, questions, concerns? Cassandra, I hope that you will pay attention to our chat box and kind of alert me to things that I might want to address, questions, comments, etc. Okay? I do appreciate that. That would be very helpful for our flow. All right.
I have a question.
See. Okay, hello. All right, so let me just see here who we are lucky to have in the house. Bear with me one sec. So we have me and Chris, Marcia, Ben, Cassandra, Devora, Bob. Who is Seymour?
That's Adele Seymour.
Oh, Adele. Adele, so pleased that you're here. Fantastic. And Walt and Loretta and Yishi. All righty, great. So what do we have in the chat box so far, Cassandra?
Devora has asked us if Kabbalah also means acceptance. And I would tack onto that I have heard that it means that which is received.
The latter part, I think, is an interesting way of understanding Kabbalah. Kabbalah is indeed a lot about how we perceive things, what we perceive to be true or a reality, how many realities we see at one time. I think one of the interesting and abstract notions about Kabbalah is that it sort of intuits and assumes multiple realities at one time. That somehow when we are fully enlightened in our mystical ways, that we'll be able to tap into a deeper awareness of those multiple realities in a simultaneous fashion. We're going to talk a little bit about that today.
So we've got some more action
Yes.
in the chat box. Yishi is asking if we are saying that Kabbalah goes back to the origin or the source of Jewish tradition. And then Ben adds that he understands the literal meaning to be knowledge way.
So look, likabel means to receive. So modern Hebrew, likabel means to receive. Kabbalah in modern Hebrew can be like a receipt that you get when you say go to a restaurant. You remember doing that? Right, you get a receipt after you go to the grocery store. Some of us are still doing that. You get a receipt, so that can be a Kabbalah. But here, the idea is that Kabbalah maybe more literally means a receiving, but receiving of what? Tradition, Torah, God, values, mitzvot, wisdom. There's a lot of things that we are in receipt of. So what were some of the others? Devora, you said acceptance.
Yeah, so Devora said acceptance, and she put forth Kabbalat Shabbat, the phrase Kabbalat Shabbat as an example.
Yeah. So by that, I read a receiving of Shabbat. So to the extent that you are accepting something in receipt of it, I guess you could think of Kabbalah as acceptance.
So Ben suggests that we are receiving a deeper understanding of what the Torah is trying to tell us when we study Kabbalah.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, Talmud Torah writ large, big umbrella concept. Everything that we do in the engagement of Torah is designed to deepen us. You know how sometimes we translate la sok b'divrei Torah to soak up Torah? It doesn't really mean to soak up Torah, it means to embrace Torah. But I think that, the idea of soaking it up is really taking it in to every aspect of our pores. Every pore in our body sort of receives Torah, accepts Torah. Kabbalah is a way of doing that. All right. Anything else?
May I make a comment?
Yes, Marcia.
Yes. Well, to me, Kabbalah is a way of looking at reality. I think it's metaphysical, not only spiritual. I think that it takes in the 4 different ways we view reality, because 4 was a very important number to the Kabbalists. And in order to be whole or wholly integrated, we have to take in the 4 different levels of being or reality: the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual. And each of these 4 different levels has a different meaning and is ranked differently.
Okay.
But 4 are needed in order to be fully integrated or healthy or whole.
All right. Sounds good. So let's actually take those 4 concepts. I like what you had to say. Let's put them in the chat box. Cassandra, would you mind writing those in? Can you repeat them, Marcia? Just the 4 headings.
The 4 headings are the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, and the spiritual levels of reality.
All right. Did you get that, Cassandra?
I did, and I am typing furiously.
All right. Perfect. All righty. So let's jump into some of honey from the rock. So today we're going to begin by looking at Honey from the Rock's foreword, which gets into Rabbi Kushner's intentionality in writing this book. And then we're going to look at the introduction, which kind of gives us a sense of how he views Jewish mysticism. In subsequent shiurim, in subsequent lessons, we can look forward to exploring each of the different gates, the 10 gates of, I'm looking for my book here. Here it is. You see that? So,
I think your screen might be frozen.
is it still?
There you go.
So in subsequent lessons, we'll look at the 10 gates, the mystical gates, which we can think of as portals, entry points to explore God and reality. It is in part metaphysical, like Marcia speaks of, and in part practical. Kabbalah is not just an abstract metaphysical exercise. It is a spiritual exercise. It is a religious exercise. It is a practice-oriented exercise as well. Okay? All righty. We'll do this Seder styles. Get some readers. Devorah, will you start us? One of my teachers.
One of my teachers, Rabbi Eugene Borowitz, once quipped that what we American Jews needed was a way to make motzi, the traditional blessing over bread, at McDonald's. He was speaking about the challenge of integrating ancient religious practice with contemporary a-religious culture.
Right. Okay. So can you think of anything more indicative of American culture, a religious culture, material culture than McDonald's.
Or what bracha to say it over sushi.
Yeah. It's a completely iconic experience, McDonald's. I mean, it's
kind of blessing would you
everything
say
that
at the
America
ballpark?
is, but not necessarily a place that we consider finding religion, right? Or being spiritual. I mean, would you say a bracha, would you make motzi over a quarter pounder with cheese?
Wrong restaurant.
What's that? Well,
Wrong restaurant.
it's an
Quarter pounder's
interesting
burger.
dilemma. It's an interesting dilemma. And Rabbi Kushner, with the inspiration of Rabbi Borowitz, also an amazing teacher, may his memory be a blessing, you're trying to figure out, okay, I'm in this secular place. I'm in this place that's not obviously spiritual or religious. And I am eating, and I would like to draw near to God. And yet I know that this is not kosher, but do I have any options? Do I have any other alternatives by which I can engage in this moment? This is my portal. I'm not at the kosher restaurant. I'm here at McDonald's. For whatever reason, that's where I am. And I'm looking for a moment of sacred, of sanctity, of holiness. And using that blessing becomes a vehicle to go from the mundane to the sacred. And yet, this is such a strange environment. Many would choose not to be there if they really want to make that motzi. But the question is, we as American secular Jews, what do we do? What do we do in that moment? Yes, questions, comments.
So Ben suggests that rather than the motzi, we might say the shechol, bidvaro.
Okay.
And John or Yishi asks whether we're talking about the mundane or the profane.
Well, so, all right. So firstly, yes, you could use a different blessing. You could use a different blessing that might be more universal, like Shekol Nehye Bidvaro. And if anything, we define Jewish mysticism as anything, it is this ability to find the sacred in the ordinary, or the extraordinary in the simple. Understand?
So
Looking for the holy and the mundane, we're looking for the extraordinary in the ordinary. Mysticism and mystical practices, right? Whether it's a what's the word? I can't even speak. A contemplative. Somebody help me with the word.
are you trying to say contemplative?
Yes, contemplative.
Okay, there you go.
If it's a contemplative exercise or it is a practical exercise, we have a way of transforming that moment and introducing holiness into it through a blessing. Because what does the blessing do? It creates a different awareness.
So I want to jump in here with more from the chat because I think that Devorah and Yishi have something interesting going on here. So Devorah's pointing out that it's a meal. And Yishi's saying that we needn't go further from the Shema. I think both of those are interesting thoughts. I also
I'm sorry, repeat Devorah's point.
It's a meal. So should that inform the way we structure the bracha if it's a non-kosher meal?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the process of finding a blessing that you can utter that doesn't presuppose that you're eating kosher food, and of course that's a perspective and a choice, but let's just play it strictly here for a minute. Might feel a little odd saying motzi over cheeseburger.
Mm-hmm.
But is there another blessing you can say that, lends less complexity to the situation and makes it a more holy moment, right? And you'll save motzi for Shabbat dinner at home that might be kosher, or the kosher restaurant, or some other meal. And by the way, I'm not saying you must avoid saying the motzi at McDonald's. You're having a muffin there, with some butter on it, I suppose you could easily say motzi and be just fine. Okay. And then Yishi.
Pointing out that the Shema is
Well,
really kind of an all-purpose go-to for sanctifying a moment.
okay. Well, look, we have autonomy, a certain amount of autonomy within our religious traditions. The Shema is grounded in Torah, clearly. So it is possible to say the Shema, in a sense, transform any moment into one that is God-filled, or that is filled with what you believe in, what you intend to do in the world. To be a force for good, you're going to bring mitzvot to the world.
Right.
Okay.
And then I think one last thought that Bob sent me privately, but I think he meant to send it to everybody. He suggests we should instead say a blessing not over the meal, but to protect the people who provided the food and prepared the meal.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. Again, what is the power of blessing but to transform our intentionality, the way we pay attention to the world, how we practice awareness. So in one way, we might be thankful because we are grateful to God, but we also might be thankful because we're grateful for all the people who put effort into making sure that we could eat. All right. So let us continue with the next reading. Ben, please, in a sense.
Okay, in a sense, Honey from the Rock is an attempt to synthesize some of the worldview of classical Jewish mysticism or Kabbalah with the ordinary life experience of its author. In retrospect, even though some of the stories and Kabbalistic insights now seem to be naive, nevertheless, taken all together, I believe that the synthesis still holds. Indeed, the importance of the book, now over a decade later, seems to be that an American-born and raised Reformed Jew would even try to understand his moments of religious insight in the imagery of the Kabbalah, or conversely, that such a writer would attempt to understand the Kabbalah through ordinary 20th century life experiences. And for this reason, Honey works best not as a primer on Kabbalah or as a glimpse into the private places of a liberal rabbi, but as a means of enticing the reader to allow a Kabbalistic worldview to inform his or everyday life experiences. One can be, if not a Kabbalist, then at least a legitimate and reverent ear in this day. The ancient mysteries still instruct us.
All right. So really important piece here because it gives us a sense of what Honey from the Rock is and what it is not. On its kind of its very basis is to synthesize an ancient worldview and contemporary experience, which is really no different than anything else we do as Reformed Jews. We are very interested in the knowledge and the wisdom and the mystery of the ancient texts. This is why we get together and study. We're very interested to understand from where those texts are coming, what are they about, what do they mean in their original context. And we are also very interested in figuring out how we, in our own time, can relate. And in so doing, we take our modern experiences and our ancient experiences and we put them together in a way that cross-fertilizes both. So somehow our lives are made better by the wisdom of the past, and somehow the wisdom of the past is shaped, even changed, and improved upon by our experiences in the now.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
How far does the past have to be the past?
Well, it's an interesting question, Ishi, because we are in the midst of Pesach, right? And Pesach is all about understanding that we're never too far from the past, right? So whether it's 3,000 years ago or it's 3 seconds ago, the past is there, and in some ways we are instructed, particularly during this Pesach season, to internalize the journey of our ancestors. In this particular time, we are internalizing their slave journey and their freedom journey. And we are internalizing it so that we can relate to it in our own time, as if we are slaves in the land of Egypt, even if we're living perfectly freely, right? So the past is really never too far away. So whether we're talking about Sinai, Stam, Matan Torah, which happened a long, long time ago, or we're talking about last week, the past has a way of informing our present and helping us make sense of the now. Okay. So I want to underline the notion this is not so much a primer. You're not going to have some lockstep approach. They'll give you perfect definition of exactly what Kabbalah is or Kabbalah. It is not all about Rabbi Kushner's personal diary. It is about helping us understand what a Kabbalistic worldview might look like and how we may be able to understand it and apply it. And we'll actually have an exercise here in a moment that brings that to bear. Okay? Next. Bob, please. One further observation.
One further observation is relevant. When Honey from the Rock was written, the word spiritual was in its infancy in the Jewish lexicon. To be sure, the word had long been a staple in the Christian community, even as Jews' sophisticated spiritual traditions under other names had sophisticated spiritual traditions under other names. But for reasons which we must leave to historians, as recently as a decade ago, Jews by and large did not use the word spiritual with any frequency or consistency. It is now commonplace, even hackneyed. I now believe that spiritual has become a code word for authenticity, has become a code word authentically or personally religious.
That's like the word contemplative. Doesn't roll off the tongue. Thank you.
Okay.
So years ago, 1998, I was finishing up rabbinic school and I was studying with Rabbi Kushner at Hebrew Union College in New York City. And we were talking about this type of question. What is spirituality? And I assure you, I had classmates who'd bring up that word in like a senior sermon, for example. And I swore that I could see certain professors who will remain nameless in case they ever watch this video. We should be so lucky. Would like roll their eyes when somebody said spirituality. Just so you understand why they might have felt the need to roll their eyes. Was trained at an organization, an institution, fabulous, amazing, blessed place of higher learning that has its roots in 19th century German Enlightenment practice, very much about scientific inquiry as it relates to text. Wissenschaft des Judentums, the scientific study of Judaism. This is what marked my rabbinic school experience, my training. It was not about Hasidic masters. It was not about Kabbalah. It was not about spirituality. Mostly because we had a hard time defining what that meant outside of Christian circles, where it seemed to have its place, but not so much in our liberal Jewish circles. That changed immensely over time, and in 2009, I would say, I had the opportunity. I'd already been in the field quite a bit, and I was looking to do some redefinition and retraining, and so I got involved in a leadership project through the Institute for Jewish Spirituality, and they put us front and center in this Kabbalistic environment. and we learned a lot about the Hasidim and their perspectives about God and about Torah and about life and about mysticism. We coupled that with physical spirituality and the learning of yoga, as well as meditative practices, which are not just a function of the Far East. They are definitely a Jewish practice as well. And so it totally revolutionized the way I look at Hasidic masters and Kabbalah. And so I feel like I have the best of both worlds as a rabbi, because I was trained in Wissenschaften, and it's very scientific, very intellectual, critical analysis driven kind of study. But also I got this spiritual world, which I never felt was hackneyed or overplayed. It was beautiful. And I feel like it's important for us to understand what we're talking about. That's the bottom line. We want to use spirituality. We want to use religious. We want to use Kabbalah, then we just need to know what we're talking about. Be able to delineate what's what, and what's authentic, what's religious, and what's Jewish. So let us.
Can I make a quick comment?
Yeah, please.
What's Jewish is that, it's like not defining a term, yet still knowing what we're talking about. Sort of puts
Right.
Judaism in line with quantum physics, the difference between a molecule being, in the solid form or a wave. I feel like Judaism is like the wave of a function, and other religions are, the purely physical.
Interesting.
You
Interesting point. Thank you. Ishi, why don't you take this last paragraph here from the foreword? Religious, alas.
Religious, alas, can mean too many things which are simply not religious, but spiritual seems to evoke the essence of whatever is personally religious. The original hardcover subtitle of Honey was Visions of Jewish Spiritual Renewal by Harper and Row, book's first publisher. For the paperback edition, apparently chose marketing over theology, and with its subtitle, 10 Gates to Jewish Mysticism. Somehow, as recently as 10 years ago, mystical sold more books than spiritual.
All right. So, again, the words we choose matter. When somebody says, "Oh, Rabbi, I'm not that religious," sometimes I understand what that means, and sometimes I don't. When someone says spiritual, it can mean religious in some ways, and it can mean not religious. So the terms, we should never assume we know what they mean. So we should always ask questions. What do you mean by this statement, "I'm not that religious," or "I'm really more spiritual than I am religious"? We're going to unpack that questioning, unpack these terms so that we can better understand what we're talking about. All righty, good. Making progress. So I learned my lesson from the last 101 class that an hour might not be long enough. I could be wrong about that. Nobody told me it was too long or too short. But I will take this up to the top of the hour. And if there's more to do and you have time, I'll spend some more time with you, okay? All right. So let's get into some Kabbalah here, some mysticism. Bob, have we heard from you? Did you read? Okay, let's see. Adele, please. Can't hear you.
Adele, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Day Ono 30. There is a place that is as far from here as breathing out is from breathing in. For the word is very near to you. Deuteronomy 30:14. Where life forever holds gentle sway over death, where people are human with the same grace that a willow is a willow. where the struggle and the yearning between male and female is at last resolved. It is, to begin with, all inside us, but because we are a miniature version of the universe, it is also found far beyond. And because we are all biologically and spiritually part of the first man, the place preceded us. And because we all carry within us the genotype and vision of the last man, the place is foretold in us. There is no surprise in any of this. We have all known it since before we were conceived by our most recent mother and father. So do not be confused if sometimes the place seems as real as your house or as illusionary as your happiness. Only know in advance, and instead, that ordinary words will not be vessels or stores for some kinds of knowing.
All right, lots to unpack here. What do you think that this means? Standing on one foot. I know you haven't had a lot of time to analyze this. By the way, speaking of analyzing, I would recommend that you get this book in some shape, way, or form. You can get it on a Kindle. You can. You might be an ebook somewhere that you can get a hold of. You can order it. Have Amazon send it. It would be good to have this book in your library. By the way, all the Judaism 101 classes that we're holding are based on books that I think you should have in your Jewish libraries. They're critical to my understanding about my own Judaism. I thought I would share them with you. So, all right. So take this notion of breathing out and breathing in. Right? There's sort of opposite conditions, right? Opposite practices. Can you breathe in and breathe out at the same time?
We have a saying in French, hopefully, it is, quand on me demande pas, je sais. Quand on me demande, je sais plus. When you don't ask me, I know. But when you ask me, I forget.
Okay. Explain that to us a little more fully.
Some things you can't explain, but you know, but you can't put into words.
Got it. So we know that we breathe out, and we know that we breathe in. We know that we can't really do it at the same time, but there is this very narrow space in between breathing out and breathing in that feels narrow but far. It's near to us, right? The word is near to us. The Torah is near to us. It's literally on the tips of our tongue, right? This we hear about during Yom Kippur. This is Parshat Nitzavim. And we're standing at special attention at Sinai, and we are there for Matan Torah. And the idea that it's so close is to encourage us to embrace it, to live it, to speak it. And yet, it feels so far, in a way, because maybe it's hard to understand, or maybe we're not sure we believe. It's all these things, in a sense, at one time, or perhaps slight little distance between, like breathing in, breathing out.
I love this. It's like the olfactory. When you first smell it, you can smell it, but after a while, you can't smell it anymore.
Yeah. Do you see this tension between opposites throughout this reading? Breathing out versus breathing in, life, death, grace, struggle and yearning, male, female, in need of some sort of resolution. All there, all inside us. We are all these realities at one time. Not one or the other, but all inside us. As though we were mini universes. Here, in a way, it's very metaphysical. Yeah.
I just wanted to make a comment. When my husband and I went to Spain the first time, we went into a synagogue that was then a synagogue, but it had been many other things, because it was originally a synagogue, and then it was a bank, and because they just took them over. But when I was in there and recited some prayers, I felt like not just the connection that I'm still reciting the same prayers as were recited in this sacred space, but that there was some universality of where we existed,
Okay.
even though they weren't there anymore, that they had experienced the same space as I was in, not the physical space, but the spiritual space.
Yeah, fascinating. So there's a sense of connection. I think what Adele you're speaking to is a sense of connection that was not experienced the same way at the same time, right? You were dealing with a historic connection that had tremendous spiritual sway. It pulled you in, even though you didn't directly experience it with your forebears, right? But you felt like you were there. I had a similar experience, by the way. I was traveling in Ukraine in the dead of winter, January 2004. And Ukraine was a very difficult place for my family and many other Jews who were victimized by pogroms and by conscription, military conscription. And my grandfather was the last of his 10 siblings born in Ukraine. There were a few born in Canada, but they left for Canada. And I went there and I felt a certain sadness as I walked through. I suppose, fortunately, that sadness was mitigated in some ways by the vibrant Jewish life that my friend and I were traveling together discovered. They had a really powerful commitment to Yiddish dance and theater and Jewish living. It was really profound. And it was very renewed and exceptional. It was like the community was reborn there. It was beautiful. But I had this sense of sadness that's competed for my emotional attention. And, you know, my grandfather left at that point, like 90, almost 90 years before that. So this last verse, or the last sentence, there's this like knowledge that sometimes goes from clarity to confusion. We have this sense of place that we know, and yet it can be illusory, cannot always feel real, right? Usually it's like what you said, like you know something in a moment, and then somebody asks you about it, and it feels elusive. Truth, knowledge. And I think the one bit of encouragement here at the end is critical. And that is that we need to know in advance that our way of communicating, using words, we'll be able to explain certain things and not other things. Just the way it is. So if you're looking for a way of defining Kabbalah from this particular reading, I think we take away from it that it's a pathway to knowledge, but a knowledge that sometimes is elusive. As much as it may be attainable, it's also elusive. It's not, it's sort of both, that we are connected with one another and throughout time by virtue of these common challenges and struggles and opportunities. And certain things are graspable, certain things are elusive, and that is the way it is. It's both, all in one package.
I think that that's the heart of really the core of Jewish mysticism, or the Kabbalah, that from apparent contradictions or apparent opposites, our life comes into being, because the purpose of our life is, I think, to synthesize in a meaningful way these apparent contradictions, which really aren't contradictions, but they're they're born from each other, and I put apparent contradictions in quotation marks. I think the whole Kabbalistic insight is that from confusion and knowledge and everything, that things are born from opposites, but they're really not opposites. And our job is to synthesize these apparent opposites or contradictions.
Right. Kabbalah, Marcia,
Awesome,
is
Marcia. Awesome.
the realm of paradox. It's the realm of competing realities, but realities that if you look at them and understand the way in which they interact, you might not, in fact, see them as opposites, but you might see them, in a sense, as complementary.
Right.
Not
because all of reality, I think, is one big box, but within this big box, there's a multiplicity and interrelationships of little boxes, but they're all related. It's all part of one. The one from the many from the one. I mean, the ancient Greeks had this many centuries ago with Parmenides, the one from the many from the one. The contradictions are just apparent.
Yes.
Yeah, and it's like as much as they are one, they're separate. Like as much, you know. I was talking to Rabbi Shulman, I remember a long time ago, and I used to always ask people, even like random people, I would like ask, what is the most interesting thing that you've learned in your life? And one Shabbat, I asked Rabbi Shulman, I said, what's the most interesting thing that you learned in your life? And he kind of thought about it, but not for very long. And he said, paradox. I will never forget that. Paradox.
That's an interesting point. And I remember you telling me that story. Look, Ishi, it seems to me, and thank you, Marcia, for your wisdom. To your point, Ishi, I think there is that space between breathing out and breathing in. They really, unless you're really focused on your breathing out, breathing in, it all just sort of happens as one cycle. It's connected. And yet there is a small space in between the two. You can't do them at the same time. There is a little bit of space in between the two human practices. Okay, so let us continue with this text, Black Fire on White Fire. Who haven't we heard from? Walt or Loretta, do you want to read? There's a legend.
There's a legend that tells that the first Torah which the Holy One showed Moses, our teacher, was written in black fire on white fire, and that in each letter and each line and each crownlet of each letter are entrances to worlds of awareness. There is not a word or even so much as a letter of what the Holy One has given that does not contain precious mysteries. And that furthermore, and at the same time, there was a whole other Torah written in white letters in what we sometimes think are the spaces between the black letters.
All right, powerful, powerful. Every last letter. It's one of the reasons why I love watching a Soferet, prepare a Torah with such love and care and wisdom. Every single letter, every single crown, every single loving touch reflects tremendous possibility, wisdom, mystery. It's powerful.
I might be the only one, but I'm feeling very overwhelmed by this.
About which part of it?
Everything. This is wow.
Well, there's a lot there, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons why, by the way, when we study text, it can feel like a slow go because we are stuck on one word, because that word is a total entry point to all sorts of new awareness, right? Every letter is an opening. Every letter is a gateway. Every letter is a doorway. to a whole new way of looking at the world, which means there's very creative potential. Doesn't mean you have to explore all those openings and be overwhelmed, but I think it gives you a sense of how rich study is, right? Down to the very letter, you can uncover all sorts of power, mystery, wisdom, virtue. And for good measure, right? It's not just what you see on the paper that possesses this, it's all the stuff in between. Which leads me to this drawing here. What do you see? You can write in the chat box.
Both.
So what do we see? What are the possibilities here? Speaking of Greek philosophy, we have a Grecian urn here.
Or two people looking at each other.
We have the profiles of two people, nose to nose. Can you see both at the same time?
I do.
You're an impressive human being.
No, you can't see both at the same time. There's a little fraction of a second to where your brain has to switch.
Right.
It's like breathing in, breathing out, right? Tiny little space.
Still there.
Once you know that both of those are there, and you have verified they're both there, then they kind of blend together. You may not technically be able to see them both at the same time, but you know they're there. What about this picture? What do you see?
Olive.
Okay. Who sees something else? Bob, what do you see? It's a good art lesson here.
I see scribbles. I see the space that allows for the Aleph to exist. Because
Okay.
if the space wasn't there, the Aleph wouldn't be there.
Okay. So from that reflection, I sense that it's possible that the Aleph itself might have been cut out of that black space, or could it be superimposed upon it?
It's like antimatter. This is the anti-Aleph.
Right. Unless it's pasted on top.
It looks to me like it's coming from within.
Yeah, it looks to me like the Aleph was drawn first and then the scribbles were drawn. Well, Aleph and then the box and then the scribbles.
Okay. So could all of the above be true?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
That is the mystical understanding. That there may be ways that we can look at this in paradox and in conflict and in tension and say, well, I really think it's this. And someone else says, well, no, I really think it's that. It's really superimposed. No, it's really cut out. Well, maybe it's something else. Maybe actually they were just making scribbles, right? And that's the prominent feature here, right? But the reality is that it's all there. We may not be able to see everything at one time, but we can recognize, for the most part, it's all there.
I mean, we can, and that's why sometimes I'm very happy I was not raised Jewish, because I appreciate so much the, acknowledgement that there is a wave, there's more than one way to see things.
Right.
But the way I was raised, it's this way, there's no other way.
Right. Yes. So by the way, I don't believe even it's only a function of Kabbalah or Jewish mysticism. It gives us this sort of this basis for multiple realities, broader thinking. I mean, look, Talmud is about multiple perspectives in many ways in competition with one another, but in many ways complementing one another. Even if they disagree, it's part of a record of collective reflection. I think that the notion that there are multiple realities, they may be paradoxical, but they're all part of a connected whole, is a strong Kabbalistic principle, and I would broaden it to be a strong Jewish principle. All right, so let's have a look here. And this will kind of bring together what we've been talking about. Let's see. Cassandra, two things are one.
Psychologists teach us that the mind is capable of perceiving either the relief or the background, but we cannot perceive both at one time. We can literally see either two faces or a Grecian urn at one time. We cannot see both simultaneously. Everything we know, excuse me, says that one thing cannot be two things at the same time. And yet, we know that two things are one thing at one and the very And yet, we know that the two things are one thing at one and the very same. Or here's the drawing of two olives, not one, but two. But sometimes we refuse to believe our eyes. This is a kind of awareness that defies logic and is seduced by the mystery of paradox. It stubbornly returns time and time again to the utterly impossible task of bringing back with it convincing souvenirs of that place which is certainly our cradle and our goal. And probably eternal life, if there be such a thing, which is as far from here as breathing out is from breathing in.
All right. If there's a distance, it's very teeny tiny, right? But ultimately, it's all about not one, but two.
That went way over my head.
Which part?
I just don't understand this slide.
Okay. So in some ways, it might be easier to look back at the drawing. It's not just a Grecian urn. It's not just two faces in profile.
It's also on a piece of paper.
It's on a piece of paper. That's true. So it's got minimal dimensionality, right? You could add all that dimensionality, but the point I want you to take away is not one. It's not the other. It's both.
And neither.
And neither. And all.
And nothing?
This is kind of a concrete way. I mean, concrete because it's a picture. It may not be concrete intellectually, but sort of this notion that there are multiple realities that make up reality.
So why worry?
Why worry about what?
Anything.
Well, because I think that our mind can play tricks on us. We might only be able to see something with a certain perspective when there are other perspectives that might lend to our improvement as human beings. But because we're locked into a particular perspective, we cannot see both or other perspectives. We cannot recognize that things are happening simultaneously. We can lose hope when maybe things look bad, but there may be opportunities for us to stay hopeful.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Everything we know says that one thing cannot be two things at the same time. That's because we cannot see two things at once. Mysticism wants to pry our minds, our hearts, our spirits, our souls away from that very specific way of thinking. Right.
If you could go back to the slide
Yeah.
where the Grecian urn is, could you go return to the slide? Now, one thing we didn't talk about was the line that frames the entire illustration.
Okay.
That line could stand for how we hold in the moment, what we're looking at. Are we looking at the Grecian urn, or are we looking at two faces? Because that sets a real solid context. It sets the limits.
Okay. Yeah.
On the paper.
So, to analogize that with Torah, we've been talking a lot about that this weekend. The Torah is, freedom is not a free-for-all. Freedom from slavery is not a free-for-all, do whatever you want. Freedom is an outcome of Yitziat Mitzrayim, the exodus of Egypt, from Egypt, but it was framed ultimately by Mount Sinai and Matan Torah, the giving of Torah. We are free to live a life of Torah. We are liberated, but we have responsibilities. And those responsibilities are mitzvot.
How do we explain the golden calf then?
I think the golden calf, I'll send you the Devar Torah. I wrote it out. It was a text study yesterday, but I wrote it out. I'll send it to everybody. It was at services and maybe put in the bulletin. But basically, the Israelites hadn't fully internalized that freedom was a freedom of responsibility. They were still kind of stuck in freedom means I'm not a slave. Freedom is whatever I want it to be. And there's this really interesting thing where the tool that Aaron used to shape the golden calf was called a cheret, chet resh tet. But the freedom that is really required is cherut, similar shoresh, chet resh taf. But the difference is instead of using an engraving tool to create a sculpture of a calf, one needs to take the wisdom of Torah and engrave it upon one's heart. And the fact that the Israelites hadn't done that left them susceptible to temptation. And so they danced around the calf. Incidentally, the notion of cherot or cherut also it's not only freedom, but it means engraving, right? With the chet resh taf. So the two tablets, the original tablets, were engraved, but that engraving never made it to the hearts of the children of Israel. And Moses didn't get it, and God didn't get it. And so there was that moment of frustration and the tablets being smashed. And then there had to be a renewed covenant. They had to do it over again. And so, by the way, this concern is extended into the prophetic writings. Jeremiah is trying to figure out how people are going to get back to the Holy Land. It's going to be a function of them engraving the Torah on their hearts. So Matan Torah, receiving the Torah, or giving the Torah and receiving it, Kabbalat Torah, is about engraving Torah on our hearts. So that's why the golden calf episode took place. There was not a deeper commitment to Torah. It was sort of a deeper commitment to one's own fears, one's own world. So, all right, it is 2:10. We can pause here and let this sink in. Happy to pick up with these other readings the next time we get together, and then get into the first gate, which is the Midbar, the wilderness.
Right.
What do you think? Good time to pause? Yeah? Perfect.
So, Rabbi, before we leave, Ben did have a question. He was
Yes,
wondering
Ben.
if the class was going to discuss meditating on Hebrew letters.
Not specifically. We're working kind of along the lines of this particular Kushner book. If you want to study about meditating on letters, we can look at another Kushner book on letters. He does spend time meditating on letters and words, for that matter. So we can do more of that. But first things first, let's do this. I'd be curious to know, and you don't have to tell me now, I just want to make this as part of the parting word, that if this is something you want to do on a more regular basis, we can hold this class more often. Figure this is going to be like a 10-session class or so, maybe 11. Not like every week, but over a period of time. So think about how you'd like to engage in this class and send me an email. Let me know. Pleased to have you. It is an honor to study with you, to teach you, and to learn from you. And I'm a person as a Jewish leader, as a rabbi, who believe that there are always multiple realities to explore to help me make good decisions. And it seems to me that this is true not only for rabbi or for a Jewish leader, but for a Jew, for a human being. We have multiple realities that we're called to parse and understand. The other thing that I take away from our experience today is that somehow everyone and all things are connected. The distance between may seem larger or smaller, but ultimately in one way or another we are connected, and that we have these shared and multiple realities. Yes, was there a question?
Yes. Do you have a reality that doesn't have coronavirus in it? Please share it.
Well, that's an interesting comment. The answer is yes and no. I mean, inside my house, the fact that we are building a life here because of coronavirus, because of COVID-19, clearly takes that into account. The fact that when we do leave the house, we have masks on to stay safe and not to create harm for others, totally driven by COVID-19. On the other hand, there is a new world that I feel like I'm a part of. A lot of it's virtual, like this, but I'm enjoying the virtual village. I've found tremendous creativity and passion, and working harder than ever, to sort of fill this new space and to be creative within it. So it feels like a new world, and both are real for me.
And no travel time. You just have to get the electronics working.
Yeah, I mean, I feel really great. So I wonder, I'd be really happy to hear more about where each of you are in sort of these varied realities. I don't know if it's so similar or different than mine. I can assure you, if people are having to work every day outside the house, it's a different world and a similar world. So maybe it's true in that way. They manifest slightly different, but it's all part of a common reality.
Well, I have 2 or 3 students just about every day of the week. So it's quite different, and different electronic versions with the students. So it's interesting, but really satisfying.
Good. Look, I mean, I think it's a burden and it's an opportunity. Same, just like we've been learning in Honey from the Rock. All right, God bless you all. Moedim l'simcha. May these middle days of Passover be joyous. Struggle on, stay well, and I'll keep you posted on the next time we do Honey from the Rock.
Thank
We are
you.
doing a program. Before you leave, sorry, let me pull this up. Next calendar experience, Tuesday night at 7 p.m. We're doing a different class, kind of unveiling all these different classes. This one's called A Life of Meaning. A Life of Meaning. It's a introduction to Reform Judaism, the sacred path of Reform Judaism. We're going to be looking at a book called A Life of Meaning by Steve Fox and Dana Kaplan. Both are esteemed rabbis who put this nice book together, A Life of Meaning. So that's 7 p.m. Tuesday, the 14th.
I will be there.
RSVP. Really happy to spend time with you. Okay, friends.
And I will get you the link.
Look forward. Take care now.
Hitraot.
Bye-bye now. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure, Marcia. You're great. You were so wise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, all. Bye, Chris. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for a wonderful hour. I
Oh,
learned
our
a
pleasure.
lot, and now I can go let my little subconscious digest it.
Yeah, hopefully it wasn't too abstract, but feels good to be part of this. We'll get better. We'll get into it. get more information, process more. It is a little crazy, so a little abstract. So it does take time to let things sink in. I do recommend the book. So.
And I need to get your website address because I have not had any of the visuals, even though my computer is on in front of me.
Okay, so we can.
Or I can get that from Marcia, I bet.
Well, so she's not actually able to access by virtue of her computer situation, but
Chris, what's your email address?
yeah, Cassandra's on. She can take your email address.
Chris?
Now, when should I give my email address?
So Cassandra is my executive assistant and also a student in our class, and she can take your information, and then we will send you the.
So Chris, I'm on the call right now. Why don't you tell me what your email address is, and I will email this to you.
Pencil ready?
Yes, ma'am.
It's CRYSMAIN1. That's the numeral 1, no space. And that's at Juno, JUNO.com.
So I'm going to read this back to you.
Go ahead.
Charlie, C as in Charlie, R as in Ralph, Y as in yes, S as in Sam, M as in Mary, A as in Alpha, I as in Igloo, N as in Nancy, number 1, the numeral 1, at Juno.com.
That's it. And
Perfect.
I think you got the first part. I couldn't quite hear you. But that's Chris Main. And because my birth certificate is Crystal, I spell Chris, CRYS, and then Main like Main Street.
Yep. Perfect. I will get this out.
And I'll have yours as soon as you send me one.
Indeed. I will send that out to you.
And may God bless us and take care of us. And hey, we're all in this Corona thing together. Hey, that's the strongest team we can have.
Yes, ma'am. All right, blessings. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye now. Thank you. All right, Cassandra, thank you for all your help today.
Yeah, that was, okay, personal note, that was moving and inspirational, and I can't help but wonder if this has given you an opportunity to really like stretch your wings a little bit, because the last couple of services have been really inspirational. Like, I think in spite of everything, we're knocking it out of the park right now.
Thanks. I'm grateful. So where does it start? I mean, well, firstly, I must underscore how important it is for me to draw some healthier boundaries. I'm just really pushing it. And I think that talking about a double-sided coin, I feel like I am positively overwhelmed with enthusiasm and ambition about possibility, the redefinition, kind of in the re-engagement and the ability to do things creatively within the constraints laid out to redefine and build back our community better is just an insatiable ambition. And I feel really great about that. I feel like it's an opportunity. At the same time, I don't create any separation from it. And I'm like tired, and it's hard to be more present in ways that I need to be present. My family, and even in my own existence. So I've got to work on that. I do agree the output's been strong. And, you know, that's been good. In some ways, I am insulated from some of the challenges that I find when I go to 5959. On the other hand, to be honest, there are things that I'm not focused on. And probably it's because my priorities are different in this setting. But I need to do a better job at educating people. What's up? why we have to do certain things. And I've been trying to do that at staff level. I need to do it with lay people as well, because I think that our priorities have shifted in some ways. We need to tend to those, and we need more hands on deck.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So we need people who might be doing other things that they think are important, but they need to shift towards yet other things. So, broadly speaking, I need people, for example, to really help me push this online learning experience.
Right.
Having to manage it, to administrate it, is nearly impossible. Having you help is an amazing benefit. But even just figuring it out and drawing people in, there's a lot going on, and we're not necessarily getting more people such that we can really change how we do things. I do think we're getting more people, and people are accessing things after we do them. We put them online. It opens it up for people to engage.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel like there's a whole generation of Gen Xers, for example, who are not engaged.
Yes.
And I feel like they occupy too much of a part of our leadership, for example. Right? I have a chance to transform our leadership, and they're not along for the ride. So I've got to find a way to get them involved.
Yeah.
And I need to find a way to help us.
Yeah, we need more Leahs.
Transform. Yeah, I mean, she's unusual. There's nobody like her. And I'm not saying that we can't benefit from others who, will just do well at their committee. That's fine with me. But what I'm saying is that, right now I don't need our old-fashioned approaches. What I need is people to help us transform the congregation now in an online effort.
We have the moment. The moment is here.
And so, what's hard though is I get this, oh, Rabbi, this is your big chance. It's like your big chance in life. It's your big break. You have an open window to innovate.
Yeah, you didn't realize you were always waiting for a pandemic, but your life has been waiting for the world to end.
But the reality is I can't be the only one responding to that. Right? So when my lay people say, well, Rabbi, I'm going to lay this out. This is your big opportunity, but I can't really help you. I'm a bypass surgeon. When I get things like that, I just figure a way to bypass that person.
Yep.
Because they're not helpful.
Yeah.
And while I might have some modicum of motivation because of what they say, I also feel like, get me Leah Jones.
Yeah.
Nicole
said the other day, if you see the need, you've heard the call, or something like that. That's what her sister's pastor says. If you
sure.
If you see the need, then I feel like that something that we need to start putting as a sort of this communal expectation. Because I agree with you. If you're burning your candle at both ends and torching the middle too for good measure, if that's what's fueling this awesome output, then the rest of the organization needs to support you better, frankly.
For sure. But that's the same old.
Yeah, yes. And I think that at least for now, the conversations around things like equitable sharing of labor and re-envisioning power dynamics, but also a rededication to self-care. This is all stuff that's very topical and very, at the forefront of everybody's mind right now, because the people who are unfortunately the ones who are getting really sick and dying are the people who, for whatever reason, aren't either able or willing to take care of themselves. And I would throw myself in that category too. I was not taking care of myself and I got really sick. The people who are more likely to die are the people who don't have access to quality healthcare or whatever. So
right. No, so there's systemic issues that need to be solved, or people will,
Yeah. So anyway,
they'll be affected in the ways they're always affected.
Yeah. From the sublime to the mundane, but sort of on the same topic, Ted Rachel has tapped me for a little bit of support getting funding from the Small Business Administration. It's easy peasy and not a big deal, but I wanted to let you know that that's going on. Also, he has asked me, and I have agreed to keep half an eye out. I watch the city press conferences, and a couple of weeks ago, Mayor Lightfoot said that there would be a fund set up specifically for houses of worship for coronavirus relief, and I haven't seen anything since, but Ted asked me to keep half an eye out for that, so that's also something that is on my mind.
Good old Ted.
Well, I mean, he's not wrong. Like, if
That's fine, it's fine. You know, it's just that I don't need him overextending you.
No, and I
certainly not without my permission. So I'm sorry, but you know, do what he's asked. But you know, let's just keep an eye on your energy.
Right, exactly, and that's precisely why I'm telling you. All right.
Forgive me, I have to go. But
good to see you. Be well. I'll see you tomorrow.
Back, and I'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us today and all your help. It was great.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.